Welcome back. NBC News Chief Data Analyst Steve Kornacki is here to break down the results of our latest NBC News Decision Desk poll. What do you got, Steve?
Yeah, Kristen. So towards the end of 2025, we know that politically a tough ending of the year for Republicans and for President Trump. And certainly this NBC News Decision Desk poll showing the same thing, a 42% approval rating. Look inside his own party. Now, overall, it's like close to a 90% approval rating with Republicans. But the intensity, how about this? The folks who say they don't just approve, they strongly approve. And you can see here, Republicans who call themselves, they say they identify with MAGA, the Make America Great Again movement. 70% of them strongly approve of Trump. Those who say, more traditional Republican, 35% of them strongly approve of Trump. And Kristen, that's a change. From the start of the year here, it was 78% strongly for MAGA, 38% for traditional Republicans at the start of the year.
So this is really one to watch because historically the MAGA base has been unmovable.
All right. So let me ask you something. What does it mean when your approval drops to 37% overall? When 61% of Americans disapprove? When Republican support for your policies drops from 67% to 56%? When GOP job approval falls from 78% to 73%, when Republican confidence in your mental fitness drops from 75% to 66%, when 49% of Americans believe you're covering up Epstein crimes, when only 25% approve of your Epstein handling, when only 53% of Republicans approve your Epstein approach, when Marjorie Taylor Greene openly breaks with you over transparency, when mega conspiracy communities turn Epstein anger on you, when Elon Musk asks, how can people trust Trump if he won't release Epstein files? When only 1/3 approve your economic management? When only 1/3 back Venezuela intervention? When MAGA radio hosts blame mishandling of Epstein files and Minneapolis surge for disconnect between promises and reality? When Newsweek says Republicans are rapidly turning on Donald Trump? When NBC reports decline is coming from inside the House? When pollsters see rapid erosion inside GOP? Yeah. That means MAGA base is abandoning Trump at his worst moment ever. Not completely, not uniformly, but significantly, measurably, dangerously. Support is bleeding, confidence is dropping, approval is falling, all driven by three simultaneous failures: economy not delivering, Epstein files, broken promises, Minneapolis ICE killings creating backlash, all hitting at once, all fracturing base that was supposed to be solid, all creating vulnerability exactly when Trump needs maximum support. Heading into 2026 midterms, when he needs every vote, every defender, every enthusiastic supporter. But instead, base is cracking, support is eroding, and Trump's facing worst crisis of his political career. Not from Democrats, from his own people, from MAGA base that's losing faith. That's questioning promises, that's abandoning him when he needs them most. And here's why this matters so much, because Trump's power has always depended on enthusiastic base. On MAGA voters showing up, on Republicans defending everything, on movement treating him as untouchable. But those assumptions are breaking. Base isn't enthusiastic, they're questioning, they're disappointed, they're seeing broken promises, failed policies, contradictions between rhetoric and reality. And that disillusionment, it's showing up in polls, in approval dropping, in confidence falling, in support eroding. And if base is disillusioned, if they're less enthusiastic, they don't turn out, don't defend, don't vote, and Republicans lose badly in 2026, creating exactly the Democratic majority Trump fears, that he warned would impeach him. So base abandonment isn't just embarrassing, it's existential threat to Trump's presidency, to his political survival, to his ability to avoid accountability.
If that's something you start seeing across the board. The other thing here, along these same lines, just look at the composition of the Republican Party. We ask Republicans, do you identify more with MAGA or with just the Republican Party itself? 50-50 right now. And again, start of the year, the balance was more on the MAGA side. So moving a little bit away from that potentially. But again, looking at that low approval rating for Donald Trump, it is the economy. Healthcare, you see, by the way, 17%. When you're talking economy, overwhelmingly, it's the cost of living, it's inflation. And then look at this. You ask folks, are you better off or worse off versus a year ago? It's 65-35 now. Kristen, that's basically exactly what it was when Trump came to office. So it's not like there's been a groundswell of people feeling differently over the course of the year.
So let's walk through specific polling. Pew survey, only 37% overall approval, down from 40% in September. That's 3-point drop in months. And 61% disapprove. That's nearly 2/3 of country against Trump. And among Republicans, support for all or most policies dropped from 67% to 56%. That's 11-point drop among his own party. among people who should automatically support, and GOP job approval fell from 78% to 73%, 5 points, and confidence in mental fitness dropped from 75% to 66%, 9 points, all significant erosion, all showing Republican base questioning Trump, losing confidence, withdrawing support. And multiple other polls confirm this: Economist YouGov, CBS YouGov, Fox News, all showing approval in high 30s to low 40s, all showing majorities saying country is worse off, all showing consistent picture: Trump is underwater, even with Republicans softening. And that consistent polling, that's not outlier, that's trend, that's real erosion of support that matters politically. And Epstein is huge driver. YouGov showing 49% believe Trump's covering up Epstein crimes. That's nearly half the country thinking Trump's protecting criminals, hiding truth, and only 25% approve his Epstein handling. 3/4 disapprove or uncertain. That's terrible. And among Republicans, only 53% approve, barely half his own party. And Marjorie Taylor Greene breaking over transparency, MAGA voices questioning, conspiracy communities turning anger on Trump, Musk publicly asking how people can trust Trump if he won't release files, all showing Epstein is fracturing base, creating doubt, creating anger, and destroying trust. And economy is another failure. Only 1/3 approved Trump's economic management, despite his promises, despite claims he'd fix everything. Prices still high, affordability crisis continues, and base is noticing, is experiencing it daily. Every grocery trip, every gas fill up, every bill payment. They're seeing Trump hasn't delivered, economy isn't better, their lives aren't easier, and they're losing faith in his economic competence. And Venezuela is third failure, only 1/3 back intervention. Even among Republicans, support started around 65% but is softening as foreign policy worries grow, as people recognize this is exactly the kind of intervention Trump promised to avoid: regime change, military involvement, endless commitment, all contradicting America first. And base is recoiling, is questioning, is recognizing betrayal of promises. And Minneapolis ICE killings are creating additional backlash, anti-ICE protests, but also far-right counter-protests, with some MAGA activists furious Trump's tactics are backfiring, are imperiling 2026 races, are creating political disaster, and MAGA radio hosts like John Fredericks blaming mishandling of Epstein files and Minneapolis surge for disconnect between promises and reality. That's base voices, base commentators, recognizing problems, calling out failures, and creating permission for base voters to question too. And pollsters seeing rapid erosion is significant. Newsweek saying Republicans rapidly turning on Trump. NBC saying decline coming from inside the House. All recognizing this isn't external attack, this is internal collapse. Base losing faith, party questioning leadership, movement cracking. And that internal erosion, that's most dangerous kind, because it's not opposition you can attack, it's your own people withdrawing support, and you can't bully them back into line, can't attack them as enemies. They're your base and they're leaving. So yeah, MAGA base abandoning Trump at worst moment ever, approval dropping, confidence falling, support eroding, over economy failures, Epstein broken promises, Minneapolis ICE disasters, Venezuela contradictions, all hitting simultaneously, all fracturing base that was supposed to be solid, and creating crisis exactly when Trump needs maximum support, heading into 2026, when base enthusiasm determines turnout, when every vote matters, when movement cohesion is crucial. But instead, base is fragmenting, support is bleeding, and Trump's facing abandonment from people who were supposed to be unconditionally loyal. And that abandonment, it's his worst nightmare, his greatest vulnerability, and his most serious threat heading into midterms that determine his survival. All right, so let's dig into why base abandonment is so devastating for Trump and what's driving the erosion, because this is about broken promises, about contradictions, about reality not matching rhetoric. So let's break it all down. So first, let's talk about Trump's dependence on enthusiastic base, because his political model has always been minority enthusiasm over majority appeal. He doesn't win popular votes, doesn't appeal to majority, but wins through enthusiastic base turnout, through MAGA voters showing up at higher rates, through movement intensity compensating for smaller numbers. And that model works when base is enthusiastic, when they're energized, when they believe. But if base loses enthusiasm, if they're disappointed, disillusioned, model fails, turnout drops, intensity disappears, and Trump loses. That's why base abandonment is existential, not just embarrassing, actually threatening to political survival. Now let's talk about specific erosion numbers. Republican support for policies dropping from 67% to 56%, that's 11 points among people who should automatically support. And that drop shows questioning, shows Republicans evaluating Trump's policies and finding them wanting and not blindly supporting, actually assessing and withdrawing support when policies fail. And that critical evaluation, that's death for Trump, who depends on blind loyalty, on automatic support, on base defending everything. But if base is evaluating critically, finding failures, withdrawing support, Trump's power crumbles. And GOP job approval dropping from 78% to 73% is significant too, because it shows Republicans are less satisfied with Trump's performance overall, not just specific policies, his entire job performance. And 5-point drop might seem small, but in closely divided electorate, 5 points is huge, is difference between winning and losing, between majority and minority. So even small erosion among base creates major political vulnerability, and confidence in mental fitness dropping from 75% to 66% is devastating, because that's Republicans questioning whether Trump is mentally capable, whether he's fit for office. And 9-point drop shows significant erosion of confidence, significant questioning. And if even Republicans doubt his mental fitness, that creates permission for broader doubts, for questioning his capability, his judgment, his fitness to serve, all undermining his authority and power. Now let's talk about Epstein specifically, because this is biggest single driver of base abandonment. 49% believe Trump's covering up Epstein crimes. That's half the country, thinking Trump's protecting criminals, and only 25% approve his Epstein handling. That's terrible approval, showing vast majority disapprove or are uncertain. And among Republicans, only 53% approve, barely majority, with 47% disapproving or uncertain. That's massive base fracture on issue that was supposed to unite them. That was supposed to be Trump exposing elites. But instead, base thinks Trump is elite, eyes protecting criminals, is part of cover-up, and that betrayal narrative, it's destroying trust, destroying faith, and destroying support. And Marjorie Taylor Greene breaking is symbolic, because she was purest MAGA symbol, most loyal Trump defender. And if even she's breaking over Epstein transparency, if even she's questioning, that gives permission to entire base. Signals it's okay to question Trump, okay to demand accountability, okay to break when he fails. And that permission, that's dangerous. That's what allows base abandonment. That's what transforms individual doubts into movement-wide questioning. And Musk's question is powerful. How can people trust Trump if he won't release Epstein files? That's influential figure with massive platform. Asking question base is thinking, and legitimizing those doubts, making them acceptable, making them mainstream within MAGA movement. And that legitimization, it accelerates abandonment, makes more people comfortable questioning, more people willing to withdraw support. Now let's talk about economy specifically, because Trump promised economic improvement, promised lower prices, better affordability, working class prosperity, all core promises, all reasons people voted for him. But reality, prices still high. Affordability crisis continues, working class struggling, and base experiencing this daily, seeing Trump's promises unfulfilled, seeing their lives not improving, and questioning whether Trump can deliver, whether his economic approach works. And that questioning, it shows up in polling. Only 1/3 approving economic management. Even among Republicans, disappointment is clear. And that economic disappointment, it's fundamental. It's about daily life, about whether Trump improves their actual circumstances. An answer, he's not, and base is noticing. Now let's talk about Venezuela and foreign policy betrayal, because Trump campaigned on no more regime change, no more foreign wars, America first. And base believed that, trusted him, expected him to deliver. But Venezuela, that's regime change. That's military intervention. That's exactly what he promised to avoid. And base is recognizing contradiction, is seeing betrayal and withdrawing support. Initial 65% Republican support is softening, as people realize this contradicts America first, contradicts anti-war promises, and represents exactly the kind of neocon policy Trump campaigned against. And that foreign policy disappointment combines with Epstein and economy, creating 3 simultaneous failures, 3 broken promise categories. And that combination is devastating, because voters might forgive 1 failure, might accept 1 broken promise, but 3 all at once? That's pattern. That's showing Trump isn't delivering, isn't keeping promises, isn't who he claimed to be. And that recognition, that drives abandonment, that makes loyal voters question, that makes enthusiastic supporters become disillusioned. And disillusionment, that kills turnout, kills enthusiasm, kills political power. Now let's talk about Minneapolis specifically, because ICE killings are creating unique problem. Because some base supports aggressive enforcement, wants tough immigration crackdown. But Americans being killed, that's too far. That creates backlash even among supporters, creates recognition that tactics are out of control, and MAGA activists recognizing tactics are imperiling 2026 races shows political calculation, shows base understanding Trump's approach is creating electoral disaster, is costing them politically, and they're angry, not at Democrats, at Trump for tactics that are backfiring, for creating political damage unnecessarily. And John Fredericks, MAGA radio host, blaming mishandling of Epstein files and Minneapolis surge is important because that's base voice, base commentator, identifying problems, calling out failures, creating narrative of Trump incompetence, of mismanagement, of promises broken. And that base criticism, it's permission for listeners, for audience, to question too, to recognize problems, to withdraw support. And that's how base abandonment spreads, through influential voices creating permission, creating narratives, and legitimizing doubt. So the bottom line is this: MAGA base is abandoning Trump over 3 simultaneous failures: economy not delivering, Epstein promises broken, immigration tactics backfiring, all creating disappointment, all breaking trust, all eroding support, and showing up in polling, in approval dropping, in confidence falling, in Republican support eroding. And that abandonment, it's Trump's worst nightmare, because his power depends on enthusiastic base, on blind loyalty, on automatic support. But base isn't enthusiastic anymore, isn't loyal blindly, isn't supporting automatically. They're questioning, they're disappointed, they're withdrawing. And that withdrawal, it's existential threat to Trump's political power, to Republican 2026 prospects, to Trump's ability to avoid impeachment and removal, all because base he counted on, they're abandoning him at exactly the worst moment, when he needs them most. Okay, so let's break this down into what actually matters, because base abandonment isn't just polling fluctuation. It has real implications for Trump's power, for 2026, and for his political survival. So let's walk through key takeaways. First, why 11-point policy support drop is devastating. Because that's among Republicans, people who should automatically support. And 11 points means significant portion reconsidering, questioning whether Trump's policies serve them, whether promises are being kept, and withdrawing support when answer is no. And for Trump's model, that depends on enthusiastic base support. That questioning is fatal because it transforms loyal defenders into critical evaluators. And once people start evaluating critically, they find failures and withdraw support. Second, Epstein as trust destroyer, because 49% believing Trump's covering up is half the country thinking he's protecting criminals. And among Republicans, only 53% approving means nearly half his own party questioning his Epstein handling. And Epstein was supposed to be his issue, was supposed to show him draining swamp, exposing elites, bringing justice. But instead, base thinks he's protecting elites, being part of cover-up. And that betrayal, it destroys fundamental trust, makes base question everything. If Trump's lying about Epstein, what else is he lying about? And that questioning, it's corrosive, it spreads, and it destroys loyalty. Third, economy as daily reminder of failure, because voters experience economy constantly. Every purchase, every bill, every financial decision, they're reminded whether Trump delivered, whether life is better. And answer, it's not. Prices still high, affordability still crisis. And that daily experience, it can't be spun, can't be explained away. It's reality, it's their lives, and Trump's not improving it, and they're noticing and losing faith in his economic competence. Fourth, Venezuela's ideological betrayal, because anti-war stance was core principle, was fundamental promise, was reason many supported Trump, and Venezuela contradicts that, represents exactly what Trump promised to oppose: regime change, military intervention, neocon policy, and base recognizing contradiction, recognizing betrayal of principles, and withdrawing support, not just over tactic, over fundamental ideological contradiction. And that's harder to repair, because it's about core values, about whether Trump means what he says. Fifth, combination as pattern of broken promises, because voters might forgive single failure, but 3, economy, Epstein, foreign policy, all failing simultaneously? That's pattern. That's showing Trump doesn't deliver, doesn't keep promises, isn't who he claimed. And that pattern recognition, that's what drives abandonment. That's what transforms disappointment into withdrawal. That's what makes loyal supporters question everything. Sixth, mental fitness decline as authority erosion. Because confidence in mental fitness dropping 9 points shows Republicans questioning whether Trump's capable, whether he's fit. And that questioning, it undermines his authority, makes his claims less credible, makes his judgments questionable, and creates permission for broader doubts about capability, about fitness, about whether he should remain in office. Seventh, 2026 implications of base erosion. Because even small drops among Republicans create huge problems in closely divided elections. Every point matters, every lost vote matters, and if base is less enthusiastic, turnout drops. If they're disillusioned, they stay home. If they're disappointed, they don't defend. And all of that, it costs Republicans elections, costs them seats, costs them majority, and creates Democratic Congress that impeaches Trump. Exactly what he fears, exactly what he warned about, all made possible by base abandonment. So, where does this leave us? MAGA base abandoning Trump at his worst moment, approval dropping to 37% overall, Republican support eroding across multiple measures, confidence in mental fitness falling, all driven by three simultaneous failures: economy, Epstein, foreign policy, all breaking promises, all contradicting rhetoric, all disappointing base that believed in Trump. And that disappointment, it's showing up measurably in polling, in erosion, in abandonment, and heading into 2026 when Trump needs maximum base enthusiasm, when every vote matters, when turnout determines control. Base abandonment is existential threat, not theoretical, actual, measured, and growing. And here's my final thought. This is how political movements collapse, not through dramatic defeats, through gradual disillusionment, through broken promises accumulating, through base recognizing leader doesn't deliver, and MAGA movement is experiencing that. Base is questioning, support is eroding, enthusiasm is dropping, all because Trump's reality doesn't match rhetoric. Promises aren't kept, policies fail, and contradictions mount. And once base starts questioning, once they lose faith, movement fractures, power erodes, and political collapse becomes inevitable. Not immediate, but eventual, through continued erosion, through more broken promises, through more disappointments, until critical mass of base has abandoned, until movement can no longer sustain itself, until power disappears. And we're seeing beginning of that, not end, but beginning. First polling drops, first visible erosion, first signs base isn't unconditionally loyal anymore. And those first signs, they predict more to come, because disillusionment accelerates. First disappointments make next ones easier. First broken promises make questioning acceptable. First abandonments make more abandonments likely. And momentum builds toward eventual collapse, toward movement fracturing, toward Trump losing base he depends on, and becoming politically powerless, unable to govern, unable to win elections, unable to maintain movement, all because he couldn't deliver, couldn't keep promises, couldn't align reality with rhetoric, and base eventually noticed, eventually questioned, and eventually abandoned him. That's trajectory. That's where polling is pointing. That's what base erosion predicts. Not immediate collapse, but eventual inevitable decline. As more promises break, as more contradictions emerge, as more supporters become disillusioned and abandon Trump, creating downward spiral of declining support, enabling more failures, of failures creating more erosion, of erosion reducing power, until Trump's political power evaporates completely and he's left alone, without base, without support, without power, just failed leader. A fractured movement that abandoned him when he couldn't deliver what he promised. That's Trump's future. That's what polling predicts. And that's beginning now, at his worst moment, when he needs base most, and they're leaving measurably, significantly, and potentially irreversibly. All right, that's it for today. If you want to stay on top of stories like this, hit that subscribe button, join the newsletter, and let me know in the comments, do you think Trump can win back his base, or is erosion irreversible? Because honestly, erosion continues, accelerates, because Trump keeps creating problems, keeps breaking promises, keeps contradicting rhetoric, and each failure creates more disillusionment, more questioning, more abandonment. So trajectory is toward greater erosion, not recovery. More base members will question, more will withdraw support, more will abandon, and eventually movement fractures completely, base is gone. And Trump, he's powerless. That's where this leads. Not immediately, but eventually, through continued broken promises, through accumulated disappointments, through mounting contradictions, until base realizes Trump isn't who they thought, isn't delivering what he promised, isn't worth defending anymore, and they leave. Permanently, irreversibly, creating political collapse that Trump can't prevent because he can't deliver what he promised, can't keep faith with base, can't maintain loyalty through continued betrayals. So erosion continues until it's complete, until base is gone. And Trump, he's finished. Politically, permanently. That's trajectory. That's future polling predicts. And that's beginning now. With these numbers, this erosion, this abandonment, at his worst moment ever. I'll see you in the next one.